the same old crap with this hockey team. A 3-goal lead, a 2-goal lead, another 2-goal lead, a loss. Sabres fall to the Avalanche. Talking about it coming up here in the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, and thanks for tuning in to this Friday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. You can check us out wherever you get your podcasts, and that does include our YouTube channel where you can watch the show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our Locked On Sabres group chat is also available to you. You can head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. Sneaky Joe DiBiase coming to you on a Friday, a day after a very familiar feeling that the Sabres have given us all. Sabres After Dark did not go the way that fans would have been hoping, especially those that would have stayed up to the end of the game. The Sabres fall 6-5 to the Colorado Avalanche. A 4-goal third period by the Avs, erasing 3 multi-goal leads of the Sabres. The Avalanche do to Buffalo what they did to Buffalo a couple of weeks ago. And I had been making a little bit of an excuse for them of, well, Colorado, when they had that comeback a few weeks ago, Dahlin had left the game, and then the Avalanche put their comeback together. No excuses this time. No excuses. Healthy. Dahlin's out there. He's out there at the end. And this team cracks again. Try to approach it differently. I don't really know what to say that's different from previous weeks, but we do have some individual plays to talk about. A bad night from Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So a lot to get to in today's show with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. You can also follow us on social media. I'm on Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports, Blue Sky at Sneaky Joe, and the Locked On Sabres podcast account is at Locked On Sabres as well. So, what is left, man? What is left to say? What is left to say? I love covering this team, talking about hockey, getting to do it for a living. They make it really hard to love them. They make it as hard as possible to love doing what I'm doing. I still do. Not complaining at all. Like I say, I'm a little bit. But they try to suck the fun out of it at all turns. They also make it very hard. Like, to talk about this team on a daily basis, like, what are you supposed to say anymore? I don't know what to do with them. What the path ahead? We've talked about it. We looked through some individuals on that front, but they just go out there and do the same stuff. So in this game, again, everything's looking pretty good. They are getting outplayed, which you'd expect. I don't ever think they're going to play a Colorado Avalanche and look like the dominant hockey team. It's going to be very rare, but it's the NHL. It's hockey. You can still win games where you get outplayed. In fact, some teams make the playoffs doing it for an entire season. And the Avalanche were a better team. They are a better team by a lot. But what were you getting? You got the power play. You got the special teams opportunities. You get 2 Jason Zucker goals on the power play. Zucker, by the way, we'll talk about this a little bit later. The 2 guys we focused on this week, talking about their futures and being players the Sabres should look to lock up right now, were the 2 guys that flashed against the Avalanche, Zucker and then Byram, who scores an awesome goal in his return to Colorado. Zucker, though, man, you got a 1-year, $5 million free agent, a guy that is 33 years old, and you might think, past his prime, does he have anything left? Sure, $5 million's a little bit of an overpay, but, what are we going to do with the money anyway? And he is doing his job and more. Zucker, at his contract, should be a bonus to the Buffalo Sabres. It should be a bonus that he's this good. Not a requirement. And it is absolutely a requirement. They'd be nowhere without his production. So I guess they are nowhere. Zucker, 2 power play goals, the beautiful assist to Byram on his goal, and then he pots another goal with under 4 minutes to go to give the Sabres a 2-goal lead, which you had to think in that moment, okay, there you go. Phew! They did it. Insurance, right? Like, you probably were hanging on a thread, like, oh, they're going to blow it. They're going to blow it. And Zucker scores, and maybe you exhaled. And, if you did that, you should have known. There's no amount of time left on this clock where this team is safe. And, of course, you get 2 goals. Cale Makar with under 3 minutes to play, and then Jonathan Drouin with under 8 seconds to play in the hockey game. And the Sabres blow the lead. This is who they are. This is who they are. There have been a lot, you could say there have been a lot of mentally fragile hockey teams during this playoff drought. And this one has got to be the worst of them. I don't even think you could debate it. I mean, I know recency bias would probably lead you to that. And in the moment, 8 years ago, maybe you would have thought the exact same way, but I don't know. I think this is it. I think this is the worst of them. And I've spoken on the talent problem. I do not believe that they have the forward group, especially to compete with the top teams in today's NHL. I think they have the defensemen to do it. You've seen Dahlin do it. You've seen Byram doing it. Bo Byram, for when he scored his goal yesterday, he entered into a tie with Quinn Hughes for the most even strength points, not even strength, the most 5-on-5 points in the entire NHL. Byram produces. Power, he's inconsistent in his own end, but in the overall, he produces. These are good talents. Forward-wise, when Jason Zucker has to be your second best forward, you have got a pretty poor group. And I think they have a pretty poor group. And that team on the other side, that is what an elite hockey team looks like. That's talent. That's talented. Never, ever say the Sabres are a talented unit when they're on the ice with a team like Colorado. Because everything is, everything's subjective. Everything is within comparison. Sure, the Sabres are a bunch of very talented hockey players, all players that have made the National Hockey League. They are within the top % of what they do in the world. They're great. In comparison to the league, they are not. In comparison to the Colorados of the world, the Torontos of the world, the Floridas of the world, they are not talented. They are not talented. And then combine that with the idea that they are this mentally fragile when they have leads and that they play like they expect to crack. You've got a lethal combination. In a bad way, a lethal combination. They have the 1-goal lead with under 10 seconds to play. And the goal I really want to focus on from a team aspect, and I want to talk a little bit about Luukkonen from this game. From the team aspect, the Sabres have 5 players on the ice that are out there to defend the lead and put the game on ice. Personnel after a timeout that Lindy Ruff has chosen. So he's got and on the back end. No problem with that at all. Samuelsson has absolutely struggled this year, but in terms of defensive defenseman, big physical, you don't really have a guy that's perfect for that. He's supposed to be the guy for that. So yeah, fine. Throw him out there. And Dahlin, of course. All right, forward-wise, who are the 3? Alex Tuch, Dylan Cousins, and Beck Malenstyn. And I have not had many things to criticize Lindy Ruff on this season as a head coach. I would want to pick on this right here. The Sabres and Lindy and Seth Appert decided, let's put out on the ice 3 guys, none of which play with each other. None of which have played on the same line at all this year. You've got a top line winger, a 4th line winger, and your 2nd line center, who I have told you, and the numbers prove, is a defensive liability. But he continues to be thrust into these defensive situations because his nickname is the workhorse from Whitehorse. Dylan Cousins being on the ice in these situations is lunacy. It's lunacy. His reputation is harming him, putting him in positions he should not be asked to play. He's not Patrice Bergeron. It is not. He isn't. It has not happened. And maybe it does, but it has not happened. Malenstyn, guy you traded a second round pick for in the offseason because he is big and physical and gritty and defensive, responsible. He's going to be perfect for you in situations like this. He's going to block shots. He's going to always do the right thing in his own end because he's going to have a lot of practice at it. His line's often going to be in his own end. And what you had in this final situation is a miscommunication, players forward-wise not knowing who to pick up, not knowing who's got who. Who am I supposed to cover? They've got the extra attacker. This was after they called a timeout, by the way, or they had a timeout and would have had to have a meeting about it. So they kind of get mixed up. There's a little bit of a scramble a few seconds before. So there is a spot here where Cousins, because he's flipped with Malenstyn in coverage, Cousins is now the winger. And from my read of this final play, that is going to go to Jonathan Drouin. Jonathan Drouin, who was in front of the net, kind of slides back out into the slot, into the open ice, and that's where he gets the wide open shot. He's got nobody around him. Cousins is on the wing. And you could criticize him for allowing himself to be switched. I wouldn't, though. It's a late game situation. I criticize him being out there. I don't think he's the culprit here, to be honest. Malenstyn is playing center. Malenstyn is in the middle of the ice. Malenstyn is supposed to be a veteran player that knows who to mark, knows that someone's got to be marked, knows what the more dangerous shot is. If you've got to make a decision, these are quick decisions that you have to make as a hockey player. They're a lot of times instinctual. But when you have to make a decision based on, I got to leave one guy open, I got to leave open the less dangerous shot. Malenstyn is sitting in the middle of the ice. Queen, Devin Tays at the top of the point, and he sees Drouin. I'm watching the play right now too. He is staring at Drouin. He sees Drouin slide back, and his feet don't move. He does not make a move to cover Drouin, and then he kind of hesitates. And as the puck is being passed, he still doesn't move to Drouin, and Drouin gets an open shot. No obstruction at all. Not even a stick on stick. Nothing to even interrupt his flow on that play. Malenstyn, to me, like, that is one where, you can only ask a fourth liner to make so much of an impact for you. You can want a fourth liner to do more for you, but when you're in a late game situation like that, you got to have your top players on the ice, and you have to have top players that are capable of making the right decision in that spot. The Sabres need more than just scoring up front. They need players that get it defensively. And Zach Benson is somebody that gets it defensively. He had a 93% expected goals for percentage last night, and he did not see the ice for the final 9 minutes and 38 seconds. I mean, it's one of the worst. I have not had a lot to chew on. I have not minded the job Lindy Ruff has done this year. I think there's only so much you can do with this group. But I think you had some bad coaching decisions last night between, one, Cousins being out there late, two, Zach Benson, one of your best two-way forwards, even though he's only 19, not seeing the ice at the end of the game. I don't get it. Maybe he wouldn't have been strong enough to interrupt the shot from Drouin, but I bet you Zach Benson would have read that play a lot quicker than Beck Malenstyn would have. I bet you for sure he would have. So, tough. How you let that goal in? How? For Sabres. You include Dahlin on this, because Dahlin, I think he's doing okay. It's not the best play. He's down on his knees. He's trying to block. I guess Dahlin really, now that I'm watching it too, he's doing what you would do when you don't know what's behind you. He's guarding against the pass out in front. He's guarding against the backdoor pass. So it's hard to expect him to kind of flip his head around real quick and see what's behind him. It ends up being that Dahlin's not blocking a pass. Samuelsson has got the guy in front. There's nobody else there. With Drouin sliding up, it's really good play by Drouin. Drouin just reads the Sabres. He reads Dahlin. He gets himself to an open spot. It's up to Malenstyn, in my opinion, to slide down, leave your point man open, allow him to take a shot from the point with 7 seconds to go. You cannot leave the guy in the low slot open, ever. If you are playing center because you have switched with the winger, or you were on the wing and you've flipped with your center, you've got to know not to leave the guy in the slot open. Horrible job by the Sabres at the end of that game. More on that game statistically. Luukkonen, yikes. What a tough night. After such a strong performance earlier in the week, man, was Luukkonen rough last night. I got some numbers on that when we return. Here on a anger, deflating, so many different adjectives that you could use for yet another disastrous blown lead by the Buffalo Sabres. When we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by Gametime. Well, I mean, you're going to have some hockey games coming up that probably aren't going to be super expensive. So if you're looking for a night out in the arena, you're probably going to have your options. And of course, more exciting than that, we've got playoff football on the way locally next week. And you got to check out all what's going to be available on the Gametime app. Love going to live events. And it's not just sports, music, comedy, theater. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert earlier this year up in Canada, and went to the Gametime app, checked out all that was available, and it was one of the best concerts I have ever seen in my life. If you can think of the mega acts that have been in Toronto recently, you can probably figure out who it is. So check out Gametime. Now Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite live events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff, shows you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres fall 6-5 to the Colorado Avalanche in this one. And listen, I just went through the final goal sequence and heavy criticism for Lindy in that spot, for Malenstyn in that spot, and somewhat for Dahlin, and I guess you could say for Cousins a little bit too. Luukkonen on the night, really tough. Really, really tough game for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who the nicest way to describe his season so far is inconsistent. And this last 7 days has proven just that. Last Sunday, Luukkonen had one of his best games of the season. He carried the Buffalo Sabres to victory. He was unbelievable in St. Louis. He was so good against the Blues. He was as good as he was against St. Louis. I would say he was bad against Colorado. Now, you could say in his defense that he was left out to dry on a bunch of these. And I wouldn't completely disagree with you. He was definitely left out to dry on a few of these. But what my bar right now for Luukkonen is high. My bar, because I've said and I believe the only way this group goes on a magical run where they get back into the playoff race is if Luukkonen gives them top goalie performance in the NHL, like one of the 10 best goalies in hockey. If he's not that, they got no shot. He's got to be better than just average starter, below average starter that has a great game here and a bad game there. He's got to be better than that. He can't have nights like he did last night. It's a great hockey team. They had their chances, but you've got a poor roster in front of you. You got to bail them out once in a while. And last night, there was no bailing out. There was none of that. The Sabres, on Tage Thompson's overtime turnover, it's Devin Tays, good defenseman. He is a defenseman. Give me a save there if you're Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. The Drouin chance before, that to me was the one that you would least want to ask Luukkonen to save. But okay, you're in position. You know, he is sliding out to the left. He is very far down in his own crease, but give me a glove save. Give me a massive save to win the hockey game. How about Cale Makar on a one-timer? There's traffic, right? Like, okay, traffic through, but it's not tipped. It goes right through. Be square, be in the right position. Luukkonen actually on that goal, I think, is a little too low and a little too far to the right. Like a little nitpicky for sure about his technique, but again, I need one of these. I need one of these to be stopped. How about Mikko Rantanen? It's a 5-on-3. Absolutely. 5-on-3. And it's one of the best goal scorers in hockey. I get it. Mikko Rantanen. But at the time Rantanen releases the puck, freeze frame it. Luukkonen square. He's facing Rantanen. His own defenseman, Samuelsson, is in the way, but Samuelsson has gone down on one knee. So I don't think he is screening Luukkonen. You're square with the shooter, and it's not bar in. Like, it just goes between the arm and the pad. Be more technically sound, and maybe that's going to be a save. Again, I think there is absolutely a defense for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen on every one of these goals. Every one of these goals, you could say individually, yeah, I mean, that's a tough save. And this is a tough save. And this is a really hard save. Every one of those, you could say that. But when you compile them all together, I need my goalie to give me a tough save just one or two more times. When you're paid like Luukkonen is, when you're relied upon like Luukkonen is, you gotta have him come through in a situation like that. And, the simple math of it is the Avalanche had 11 shots on goal in the third period and overtime. 11 shots on goal. That's not ridiculous. Like, that's an average of less than 30 shots in a single game. 11 shots over a period plus. 5 goals were allowed on those 11 shots. That simply cannot happen. You cannot have that where any goalie, no matter how difficult the shots are, I don't want to say that completely. They're in a vacuum. If they were all 2-on-0s, I wouldn't want to say that he's got to make a save. But, you know what I mean? 5 goals on 11 shots. You cannot have that from your starting goaltender who's been paid handsomely, and they are absolutely relying on to get back into this playoff race, or else they have no shot. So, tough night from Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, in my opinion, and he absolutely has to play better than that. All right. Real quick positivity. Can I take 30 seconds for some positivity? Zucker is awesome. And we'll talk about him and Byram coming back. And my quick opinion on the Zach Benson goal that was reviewed and upheld for goalie interference. I think they made the right call, and I would like to believe that I'm not biased in the situation, and that if it were flipped the other direction and an Avalanche player fell on a Buffalo Sabre because he was thrown into them, I would want to say that also should count. If a player is thrown into the opposing goaltender by the other team, that's not his fault. It's not his fault. It's the defenseman's fault. Hey, if you don't want the goal to stand, don't have your defenseman throw players into your own goaltender. So the only thing I would say in Colorado's defense is Zach Benson does get thrown around a lot. And I don't think you could be mad about it. You could be frustrated because what Parker Kelly, the player for Colorado that throws him in, what is he really supposed to do? He's battling with Zach Benson. He's battling with a 160-pound, 19-year-old, 5'8" player. What's he supposed to do? He's going to win that battle, and he won it too easily because he throws Benson to the ice, and he just happens to throw him hard enough into his own goaltender. So it's kind of one of those where I'd be frustrated if I were the other team because, man, you got a guy in the NHL that physically just we can throw around. But that's the breaks. I think if you throw an opposing player into your own goaltender, it's on you. It's completely on you, and everything that happens after should count. All right, when we come back, Zucker and Byram. Let's talk a little more optimistically, and kind of resetting what we've talked about earlier in the week with 2 players that we've argued they should pay. I've argued that Sabres should pay, and they just had great nights in Colorado. That when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Tomorrow, the Sabres are going to be in Vegas. And listen, if you really want to go all in on an emotional hedge, not only could you take Golden Knights money line, you also could look at a Jack Eichel goal prop. Now, that's extreme emotional hedge, right? Because if Eichel scores tomorrow or scores a couple tomorrow, not going to feel great. But hey, if you have a little bit of a prop down on it, maybe you'll feel a little bit better. Check it all out at FanDuel Sportsbooks, not just hockey, football, of course, and the NFL playoffs are almost here. Not too late, though, to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You'll have some games with divisions on the line tomorrow, and then Sunday playoff seeding on the line as well. Right now, new customers finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel, so many ways to pick up the W, touchdown props, over-unders on yardage, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Final segment here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, recapping a 6-5 defeat. Next up does not get any easier. The Sabres are going to Vegas to play the Golden Knights. Now, last year that went well. Zach Benson had an amazing game, scored a goal late that helped propel the Sabres to victory. So Benson was good. Eichel, I think, missed that game due to injury, if I remember correctly. And we'll talk a little bit about that game as the weekend progresses here. But quickly, if you don't follow the West right now because of, hockey just maybe being debilitating to you, Jack Eichel is in the Hart Trophy conversation. He has more assists than games played this year. If Jack Eichel had not scored a goal this year, he would be over a point per game. In 38 games, he has 10 goals and 40 assists. 50 points. I mean, doing some quick math, I hadn't looked this up earlier. Jack Eichel, who, again, is in the Hart Trophy conversation and arguably having his best season that includes his time with Buffalo. He's on a 108-point pace, which would easily be his career high. 82 with the Sabres and 18-19 was his career high. He's on pace to smash that. We'll see if he can stay healthy, though. So Eichel against the Sabres. Good luck to them. This Avalanche game, Jason Zucker, phenomenal. What a power play merchant he is. In front of the net. Goals kind of look the same, right? Like, he's just good at cashing in around the net, whether it's a tip, whether it's putting a rebound home, sticking with it, right? Like, that final goal that should have been the insurance goal that won it for the Sabres, he is battling in front with a bouncing puck, and he doesn't stop shoveling at it. He gets actually his third opportunity on it before he finally gets it to go home in the top corner. So Zucker, and then the feed to Byram, just a hat trick. A hat trick for a guy that's on a 1-year, $5 million contract. His numbers on the season continue to climb and look good. Zucker now in 39 games played has 14 goals and 16 assists, just clearing the bar so easily. And then Byram, what a play those two had together. Byram going in on the rush. We talked about him yesterday as someone that jumps up in the play, is very good at it. He's near the top of the league on 5-on-5 scoring. Byram is just a treat to watch. Let's just put it this way. I know this was supposed to be the more optimistic segment, but it's gonna be a tough pill to swallow if one or both of those guys leave. And with Zucker, the Sabres will have a decision to make on him, because if they want to keep him and it's the deadline and they still haven't signed him, they might have to make a decision on, do we want to get something for him or risk losing him for nothing? And in the name of risking losing him for nothing, we're going to give ourselves a few extra months to try and sign him. And Byram, of course, there's a big negotiation coming up this offseason between Byram and the Sabres, whether or not they can get a long-term deal done with him. To me, they should absolutely want to. And again, I don't want to be stuck thinking about his feelings and his thoughts on it here every time, but what does he think last night? He's back in his home building where he won the Stanley Cup. His former team is just running around the ice at 1,000,000 miles an hour. He has a great play. He holds up his end of the bargain. Had a fine game, I thought, and scored a goal. And his former team is just like, what are you going to do? This team is not near that, and you probably miss it. You probably miss it. So I don't know. I'm kind of in Zucker. I feel like it's more likely the Sabres get him done because they could give him, I could see them overpaying him because at his age, that might give them some leverage. How many teams are going to be willing to give a good size contract to a 33-year-old? Maybe not many. So that might help them get Zucker in because of the risk that is signing him. Byram, I just don't know if they're going to be able to do it. I hope so. I'm crossing my fingers that I'm wrong about Byram and what he could be thinking about it here. But he's such a good player, and I don't know. I don't know about him staying long term. So, anyways, they shouldn't design the whole thing to save, Bo Byram, 6-5. 6-5. Day 5,001 of the Sabres playoff drought. We'll see if they can win against Vegas tomorrow night. Quickly before we leave here, there's almost, for some, it seems, an enjoyment out of watching them be embarrassed. I think there's such a detest for the whole operation now. There is such a resentment and a hatred towards there's an anger towards the Sabres. 5,001 days. You should be angry at them. And when you're mad at someone, when you're angry with someone, if you even detest them right now, seeing them embarrassed might feel good in some way to you. Like, if you are a believer that they don't take it seriously, they don't act like a real NHL organization, they should act on impulse more, that they're too slow to get to decisions, that they're not good at their jobs, right? And that would be Adams and others, that they don't invest in the team, and therefore you'll never be good until you do that. If you believe all of that, then you're going to, I think, as you're angry at these people, enjoy seeing them dragged, enjoy seeing them embarrassed until the day they're gone. And that's kind of where I feel some, not all, fans are with this hockey team. It's when they lose a game like that, it's almost, see, this is what you get. This is what you get for acting and running the organization the way you do. And as long as you do it, this is what you're going to get. It's almost like eventually you'll take your medicine. I just don't know that they ever will. So I don't know if any of that makes sense, but it would almost be like if tomorrow night, nobody's rooting for Eichel, Sabre fan wise, I don't think, but if Eichel scores a hat trick and the Sabres lose by 7 tomorrow to the Golden Knights, there's going to be anger, but there's also going to be, see, this is what you get. This is what you get for keeping Adams as the GM and never making moves and not making trades in the middle of seasons and never acting on impulse. This is what you get. So, hopefully none of that happens, and hopefully the Sabres just beat the doors off the Golden Knights tomorrow, but I am not optimistic about that. The standings as it stands today, you have in action tomorrow, you have the number 2 team. Well, actually, by points, let's do it by points percentage. By points percentage, tomorrow night, you have the number 1 team in the Western Conference against the 16th team in the Eastern Conference. The best West Coast team against the worst East Coast team. Sabres and Golden Knights tomorrow. Yeah, not that optimistic. All right, well, good luck to them. We'll talk about it. If you would like to rant or rave, or you want updates, and maybe you don't want to watch the game, but you still want to know what happens, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres, sign up for the text club, and we'll hash it out. It's a safe space for everybody. All right, it's going to do it for us on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Check out Joe Marino, Locked On Bills, getting you ready for Bills and Patriots this week. Steal and Flip got you covered for Locked On Fantasy Hockey. We'll talk to you next time here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.